Hello RPG fans, welcome to the world of unlimited imagination. If you're like me, you love to think about what kind of character you might play next in your favorite role-playing game. So today, we're going to go through a character from level 1 to 20 for the 2024 rules for Dungeons & Dragons. This character is going to be Tenamut Stagger Shell. It's a standalone character that you could play in any campaign, but as presented today, this character is meant to be part of a 4-person team called Aziran's Aspirants. This is the 4th out of 4 in that series. The other 3 are already posted up, so if you haven't checked those out, take a look at the channel and see who else is in Tenamut's group. Please remember, as we get started, do hit that like button, subscribe to my channel to see more of this stuff in the future. Those things really do help the channel, help more people to see this content, so I'd appreciate if you could do that for me. Also, leave a comment if you have better ideas for the build or if I've misinterpreted some rules. I'm always happy to hear that in the comments and we can learn together. The concept for this character, this is going to use the Way of the Drunken Master as a subclass. It's going to be a combination of Barbarian and Monk. And the Drunken Monk isn't a popular subclass, but it is pretty fun to roleplay if you like that kind of thing. And for this particular group, the level 6 subclass features is really going to give some epic moments. So we're going to go ahead and take that and have a little bit of fun with this build. This will be a strength-based monk. We're going to take advantage of all the things that you can do with a barbarian as well as the things that you could do with a monk. But in order to do that, we need to do strength-based attacks. That's going to leave us some problems with our ability scores. So they're going to be a little bit lower than usual than a monk would want. So we're going to take the Tortle species and try to solve some of those problems. So let's work through that. In terms of the role targets, I do a performance chart for each character. I divide combat up into 3 roles, exploration into the discovery and solving aspects, and then the social interactions for the character. So let's rate those. Damage, we're putting it at 8 out of 10. This character can do a lot of damage to a single target. There's other characters in the group that can do more if there's multiple targets, but this character is going to be pretty good at putting a lot of damage into one single target. In terms of support, we're going to give that a 2. They've got a couple support abilities, but overall this character is not really meant to support the group. Barbarians can't concentrate on spells, so we won't have a concentration spell that we can use in combat, things like that. In terms of control, I'm going to rate that a 9. This character is meant to control the battlefield. We're actually calling this character a position control skirmisher because we're intending to grapple the enemies, use the push ability from weapons in the new weapon masteries in 2024, and move characters around the battlefield, position them where we want them. So I'm going to give control here a 9. Tanking is also a form of control, and Tenamut will be able to tank whatever he wants. In terms of exploration, we're going to give that a 6. This character can be a scout. We're going to have stealth and perception and be able to hide and sneak and scout ahead with the rest of the group. We've got Halleck in the group who's a better scout, but it's sometimes nice to have 2 characters who are positioned ahead, and especially if this character is ahead when combat starts, that's better. In terms of problem solving, we have some skills that help with certain specific problems like survival, but overall we're not going to be a big problem solver. We'll give that a 4. And then in terms of influence, we'll give that a 1. This character really doesn't have much to say in social settings and probably in fact makes things worse in a lot of cases. I refer to this character as a skirmisher, so let me just tell you what I think a skirmisher is in Dungeons & Dragons. If you think of a tank as being a character that wants to stand in front of an enemy and do something so that the enemy intentionally hits that character. You need a high armor class and high saves, and often these characters have to give up a lot of damage and just focus on armor class and saving throws. And I will say in here that if you don't have high saves, then I don't think it's truly a tank, because you could have a highest armor class you want, and if something charms you or just banishes you or somehow hold person, then you're completely out of the combat. So a good tank has to have armor and saves. A bruiser is a character that gives up some of those tanking abilities to just deal more damage. And this could be an entire range from a character who's quite tanky that just chooses to use a 2-handed sword instead of a shield to do more damage, all the way down to characters like rogues or rangers who intend to get into melee combat and they give up a lot of their tanking abilities just to do a lot of damage in close combat. Skirmisher is somebody who gives up some of the defensive capabilities for mobility. So movement speed or abilities that include the disengage as part of the action, so that they're constantly able to move wherever they want to go on the battlefield. And they're giving up maybe a little bit of damage or maybe a little bit of tanking ability for a lot of movement. So this character is intended to be a skirmisher. We're going to have high movement. We're going to have a lot of ways to disengage from enemies. So anytime we don't want to be in close combat, we can just walk away and go somewhere else. And that's going to be important for the play style of this character. One specific thing I'll say before we get into the role play for this character, rage doesn't necessarily have to mean anger. And because this character is going to take the way of the drunken monk, I am not interested in having a character that's both drunk and angry at the same time. I don't think that's a good combination, so I wouldn't roleplay it that way, and I won't present it here this way. We're going to present rage as intense focus. So monks have focus points, and the rage is just a very deep focus that this character can take. We don't have to call it anger. All right, for roleplay, Tenamut's family lives near a remote lake somewhere out in the deep forest. They harvest swamp weeds and raise animals. They sell and trade the animals to other travelers and harvest swamp weeds for their little village of Tortles. There's not much to do on a farm in the middle of a forest, so Tenamut takes up spending a lot of time in the woods. He likes to track animals, hunt fish, run around, and has also taken up drinking as kind of a little bit of a bad habit. As he starts to get through his teenage years, he's not really showing any interest in settling down and starting a family of his own, and his father's getting pretty concerned about this and eventually sends him to a monastery to work as a carpenter. Tenamut starts training with these monks, and so far he's not very successful with it. He's misunderstanding some of the principles and not using the focus like they want him to use the focus, and probably his drinking is interfering with that a little bit, but he's trying. So as he's struggling along, one time, one of the monks in the monastery says, "Hey, look, there's a shrine in the forest nearby. Why don't you go there and try to get some advice? There's this benevolent spirit that visits there. Maybe you can go there and get some help with your journey." So he takes off, and as he's traveling, he notices that there's this group of merchants on their religious pilgrims on their way to the same shrine that he's going. But he doesn't want to interfere with them, so he goes past them and kind of sneaks by him in the middle of the night. He also notices that there's a group of bandits waiting and watching from nearby. But he passes them by. He gets to the shrine early the next morning and does his meditation. Now, Tenamut figures that the old monks just sent him out here to get him out of the place for a few days. So he's kind of skeptical about the whole thing. But the Fey spirit Aziran responds to him and says something like, "Speak your truth and I'll help you." Tenamut's always partially drunk. He's always a little bit tipsy. So I imagine, just tells a whole bunch of drunken truth, including the story about the bandits who are following the pilgrims. And he does, in fact, receive help. So he's got a little bit of guidance now, and he knows how to actually succeed at what the monks are trying to teach him, just not quite yet. And this sort of represents the idea that he's going to be a barbarian at level 1, and then at level 2, he'll be able to get those monk abilities. So he's working toward them. The Tortle. To get as many ability scores as we need to get strength as a main stat, we're going to have to sacrifice some wisdom and dexterity and constitution that we would normally have as a monk. And that would leave us, if we're trying to use unarmored defense, it would leave us in a bad spot, right? We would have 14 armor class. Barbarian's going to give us reckless attacks, and if we do reckless attacks, that gives the enemy advantage. And if you have advantage and a 14 armor class, that's a recipe for disaster. So we need to at least get the armor class up to 17. Tortle just gives a base AC of 17. Dexterity modifier doesn't apply to this number. You can't wear light or heavy armor. It's fine. We don't need to wear any armor at all. We don't need to use a shield with this build, so this is fine with us, and we'll start out with AC 17. So at level 1, this is a little bit better than most monks can do, but then by level 4, they would catch up, and by level 8, most monks would pass us. Or certainly by level 12. But, if most character levels are played between 1 and 10, then this character is going to be equal to what other monks would do just by having the species. They get this claw attack that allows them to use a D6 unarmed strike. That would be pretty nice, except we're going to take monk and get that anyway, so that'll be kind of irrelevant. The only time it would be useful is if you actually needed to do slashing damage instead of bludgeoning for some reason, so it might be useful there. Shell defense, you can withdraw into your shell. You get +4 armor class, advantage on strength and constitution saving throws, but your prone and your speed is 0. You probably won't use this very often, I suppose, if you got into the middle of a bunch of enemies and needed to turtle up and have high AC to try to survive. Or if maybe there was a particular strength or constitution saving throw that you're trying to make. Perhaps you're trying to get rid of some poison or something. Anyway, there might be a reason to turtle up, but I don't think you're going to use that very often. The Tortle species can also hold their breath for an hour. This is not water breathing. It doesn't let you go underwater indefinitely, but it would let you go underwater for an hour. It would also, if there's some weird situation like plants emitting toxic spores, you could walk across that. You have 600 rounds to get through. You could reasonably say, if the risk is from something that I'm breathing in, then I just don't breathe it in. And you don't have to make constitution saves versus holding your breath. So if somebody's trying to, garrote you or something, maybe that helps. So it's a weird little trinket ability that, I don't know, 1 of 100 sessions it might be relevant. This is printed in the supplements for Wildmount, and then it got reprinted in Mordenkainen's Monsters of the Multiverse. I would use the one from Mordenkainen and take the survival skill from that list. Turtles don't have dark vision, so that is a problem you have to solve. Remember that it's a game of imagination, so if you do get Goggles of Night, you could put them on and they could take any shape they want. Turtles might look cool in goggles, or maybe you want it to be a red headband with eye holes cut out that you put over your eyes. And then you could just be, Michelangelo with an alcohol problem. All right, strength is the main concern for this character, so for a background, we're going to look for strength. Sailor, farmer, guard, entertainer could all be reasonable choices. I looked at entertainer pretty closely. It could be a good choice. The party doesn't have somebody doing this yet, and giving everybody inspiration every time you rest is helpful. But I really wanted Tavern Brawler. I thought that was really the feat that I was going to want. But let's take a look at it, because in the end, I decided against using this feat. But let's look. So if we're going to be a monk, we're going to get unarmed strikes. So let's look at what we could have for synergy here. Enhanced unarmed strikes, you can do D4 plus your strength modifier instead of normal damage. We don't care about that. Damage rerolls. Whenever you roll damage die for unarmed strike, you can reroll the die if it's a 1. Improvised weaponry. We have proficiency with improvised weapons. We can hit people with a beer mug or a bar stool or whatever we want. And then push. When you hit a creature with an unarmed strike as part of an attack action on your turn, you can deal damage to the target and also push it 5 feet away from you. You can only use the benefit once per turn. I really thought that push was good. And I thought rerolling damage on a 1 would be good for unarmed strikes. The issue is there's not currently an unarmed weapon in the game. Maybe they're going to fix that with the DMG when it comes out. I really hope that they're going to have unarmed weapons. But what that means, as you go up in levels, when you have a +1 dagger, you could use the dagger. It's a monk weapon. It'll get the monk's martial arts die, and it'll have a +1 to hit and damage. If you try to do an unarmed strike, it'll still be +0, because you're not doing the unarmed strike with a weapon. You get a +2 weapon, +3 weapon, the discrepancy gets more and more. So unarmed strikes can't take advantage of the magical properties of weapons yet. Hopefully that'll get fixed in the DMG. So the amount of times that we're rolling an unarmed strike and dealing damage with it is lower because we're going to be using daggers. Well, then we don't get to reroll the 1 because it's not an unarmed strike. With push, when you hit a creature with an unarmed strike as part of an attack action on your turn, you can deal damage. So it has to be part of an attack action. It can't be a bonus attack where you do, monks get a bonus attack where you can do an unarmed strike. You can't push because it says here that specifically it has to be part of an attack action, and that bonus action is not part of the attack action. Again, if you're using daggers, there's a way that we could get an attack within our sequence once we get to extra attack, but by that time we're going to be wanting to grapple the target, so pushing it 5 feet away is useless. So we're not going to get to reroll that damage very much because we're going to be using weapon attacks most of the time. We're not really going to get to push things till higher level. You can't push as an opportunity attack because it has to be on your turn. So the more I looked at this Tavern Brawler feat, it's so restricted. You basically, the amount of times that you get to take advantage of it, the more I looked at it, just went down and down and down and down. So then I looked at Farmer. If we're having problems with our ability scores, Farmer gives toughness as a starting feat. So I kind of looked at if we made 12 Constitution on the character. At level 1, we'd have 13 hit points, right? That's the 12 that we get from Barbarian plus 1. And we could increase that to 15 with the toughness feat. Well, 13 is already enough hit points. But I know that monks only have a D8 for their hit die, so I kind of calculated out where the hit points would be at various levels going up. We'd have 39 hit points at level 5, and that's really not that great. Looking at level 10, we'd have 71. By level 15, we would just be over 100. And at level 20, we'd only have 133. And for anyone who's ever played a Barbarian before, one of the gimmicks of the Barbarian is just having a lot of hit points and having resistance to damage. And you can just take quite a few hits during combat before you run out of hit points. But this character is, I won't say that they're low on hit points, but they're certainly not a good hit point battery. So if we take these toughness feat, we can get to 49 hit points at level 5, 91 at level 10, 131 at level 15, and 173 by level 20. So that's putting us in good shape. That gets our bank of hit points up where we need it to be. So we're going to take that. Farmer it is. Nature and Handle Animal are both good skills for this character. Nature is okay-ish, not the greatest thing, but we'll take it. Carpentry is a decent craft. You can craft some things overnight. It also gives you opportunities in-game to do stuff, building defenses if you have to defend a town, or repairing buildings or things like that. It can also help in some situations if you need to get through a door or something like that. Maybe you can claim that your skill with carpentry gives you some insight before you try to knock it down with your strength. Access to strength, wisdom, and constitution with this background. So that's going to put us at level 1 Barbarian, 15 hit points. That takes the sting out of only having 12 con. We're going to take perception and stealth. I really wanted athletics here, but if I take athletics, I have to give up stealth, and I really want stealth. So perception and stealth are what we need to be able to scout ahead for the group. And later on, we're going to get a feature for Barbarians that's going to let us increase our perception and stealth. So I think to stay with the synergy that we'll get eventually, we're going to go ahead and take those at starting. And we'll just rely on the fact that we have good strength. If we need to make an athletics check, it should be okay. We'll have rage twice a day. In the new rules now, you can extend that up to 10 minutes. Using a bonus action to extend your rage. If you're out of combat, it should be perfectly fine just to say you're extending your rage continuously. You'll have resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, and you'll have +2 to all your strength-based attacks. So let's read rage damage specifically. When you make an attack using strength, either a weapon or an unarmed strike, and deal damage, you gain a bonus to the damage that increases as you gain Barbarian levels. We're never going to get past the +2 damage, but okay, it'll give us +2 damage every time we hit something with strength. Can't concentrate or cast spells while we're raging. We don't need to anyway, so that's good. For weapon masteries, we're going to take the pike for push and the dagger for nick. Nick property says that you can do 2 weapon fighting, and you can make your extra attack within the attack action. That's going to be necessary because we want to save our bonus action for that extra unarmed strike that we can make as a monk. Eventually, flurry of blows if we need to. Ability scores, we're going to be able to put 9 points in strength and get full 17. We'll put 9 points in dexterity as well, and we'll get that to a 15. We'll increase that at some point during the character build. Constitution, 4 points there gives us a 12. And then Wisdom, 5 points there gives us a 13. And we can put in a +1 from our background to give us a 14 total Wisdom. So, again, the stats, if you look at Dexterity, Con, and Wisdom, are a little lower than you would typically take on a monk because we have to sacrifice for strength. But with the Tortle shell, we're still going to get our armor class, and we should be okay. Skill inventory, nature, survival, perception, animal handling, and stealth, all at +4. That's going to allow us to be a pretty good scout, especially outdoors. Handle animals if we find them. So, yeah, we're kind of a woodsman, sort of a barbarian. For equipment, we get 75 gold from Barbarian, 50 gold from Sailor. We don't really need much, right? Because we don't need any armor at all. We could take a pike, only cost 5. A carpenter's tools cost 8. An explorer's pack is 10. I would spend like 20 gold on a bunch of flasks and water skins and alcohol. If this character is going to be drinking, then, you know, for the way I would roleplay him, he likes to be underestimated. So he's going to have a lot of what appears to be alcohol on him, but a lot of it's going to be really, really watered down. Barely alcoholic at all. Just enough to give him a good buzz kind of all the time. We're going to take 8 daggers. You never know when you need a lot of daggers because you might need to throw them. We'll take quarterstaff. If you feel like topple is a better skill at low levels, you could take topple instead of either nick or push, depending on how you want to build your character. The quarterstaff isn't a light weapon, so you couldn't do something like topple with your quarterstaff and still get the extra attack from light weapons. So it's up to your preference, but I might take a quarterstaff like as a walking stick. It might be something that you'd want to do for appearances. Every good monk has a stick, right? 75 gold pieces left over to spend how you want. I would save that toward a bag of holding. There's really no need for armor for this character. Bag of holding, goggles of night, one of those things is probably your first item on this character. You have 17 strength, you can carry 255 pounds. I typically want the strongest character in the group to be the one who's holding the bag of holding and carrying all the stuff from the group. If somebody tries to grab it and you have to make a contested strength or dexterity check to hold on, the strongest character in your group has the best chance to hold on if your DM plays it like that. So I typically give the bag of holding to the strongest character in the group. At level 2, we're going to multi-class into Monk. Unarmored defense at this point would be 14, but we're just going to have 17 from our shell. Martial arts says you practice the martial arts, give you mastery of combat styles that use unarmed strike and monk weapons. Monk weapons are any simple weapons or martial weapons with the light property. So you have to be either unarmed or wielding only monk weapons, and you have to be not wearing armor or shield to take advantage of martial arts. That's important to know later on. Bonus unarmed strike. You can make an unarmed strike as a bonus action. You just get a free single bonus unarmed strike. Martial arts die. You can roll 1d6 in place of your normal unarmed or monk weapons. The die changes as monks level, so instead of a dagger being 1d4, it's going to be 1d6 at the start, and that die will go up as we go up in monk levels. Dexterous attacks, I want to read this carefully. You can use your dexterity modifier instead of your strength for the attack and damage of your unarmed strike and monk weapons. In addition, when you grapple or shove, use those options of your unarmed strike. You can use your dexterity instead of your strength. Please note, just because you can doesn't mean you will want to. Okay? Doesn't mean you will want to. Grapple or shove may use dexterity, but you can still use strength. Our character's just going to continue to use strength. We don't need to switch to dexterity. Now, I guess if you got hit with something that reduced your strength, then you still have your dexterity as a backup for this particular character. Unarmed strike. Instead of using a weapon to make a melee attack, you can use a punch, kick, headbutt, or similarly forceful blow. In game terms, it's an unarmed strike. By this definition, you can have a dagger in each hand and still do an unarmed strike, no problem. It can be a kick. Okay? But when we get to grapple, you'll see that there's a difference there. So damage, you make an attack roll against the target, and then you use the damage roll and get bonus equal to your strength modifier plus proficiency bonus. I'm sorry, the hit, your bonus to hit equals your strength mod and your bonus, and on a hit takes damage equal to, in this case, 1d6 plus strength modifier. Now, when we get to grapple, target must save on a strength or dexterity saving throw or has a grappled condition. The DC is equal to your strength modifier and proficiency bonus. So 8 plus 2 plus 3, DC 13 at level 1. The grapple is only possible if the target's no more than one size larger than you and you have a free hand to grab it. So in this case, we can make an unarmed strike to grapple, but we have to have a free hand to close the deal. And it doesn't do damage normally, okay? So you can either do damage with the hit, and then you can kick, headbutt, whatever you want to do, or you can grapple, which requires a free hand and does not do damage. You can also shove. All the same things apply in all the same ways. And there are times where once you get a character grappled, you might want to do a second unarmed strike to shove them and push them down, and then they have the prone condition. If something has both prone and grapple, at least the way it's ruled at the table I'm familiar with, you can't stand up. So prone gives you 0 movement. You have to use half your movement to stand up. I realize half of 0 is 0, and technically you can still stand up for free, but I think if your movement is 0, you have no movement to be able to stand up. So once you get grappled and prone, you have to break the grapple before you can stand up. That's a pretty rough position for a lot of enemies to be in. If they have to use their action on their turn to break the grapple, then we've already succeeded. Okay, now let's go more in depth on grapple. 1 grapple per hand, and a successful grapple gives it the grappled condition. And to escape a grapple, the creature can use its action to make a strength athletics check or dexterity acrobatics check to escape the grapple's DC. Now, it's strange when the grapple is being initiated, the enemy's making a saving throw against your strength, but then to escape the grapple, it's still an athletics or acrobatics check. So that's interesting. The condition ends if the grappler has the incapacitated condition or if the distance increases beyond the grappler's range. And that simply means spells like Misty Step move 30 feet away. There's no way the grapple can continue because you simply teleport and you're too far away. All right, the grappled condition itself, your speed is 0 and can't increase. You have disadvantage on attack rolls against any target other than the grappler, and the grappler can carry you, but every foot of movement costs it an extra foot. So it's basically double movement to drag something. That's the same as it used to be. So with this character, we're going to have to occasionally make these decisions whether we're going to push, grapple, or damage. And with the saving throw mechanics, suffice to say, grapple is now going to be less reliable than it used to be. When it was an athletics check, you could get expertise, make your athletics go really high. You could get guidance or bardic inspiration, other things to increase your skill checks, where you could reliably say, no matter how big and strong the monster is, I'm still going to be able to grapple it. With saves, it's pretty hard to impose disadvantage on saves. There's things like Bane effects, or Mind Sliver, things like that will reduce the saves by a d4, but it's hard to reliably say that we're going to get a grapple. So while we're hoping to get grapples on enemies at some point with this character, we're also going to have that push mechanic from our weapons to be able to push characters around, and if pushing them is enough, then we don't need to grapple them. So if you're confronted with a couple elite adversaries, even at low level, you can use the push mechanic on the pike. Nowhere in the push mastery do I see that you can only affect the character once per turn. So once we get extra attack later on, if we hit them once and push them, we can hit them again and push them the same time. Second time, we could push 2 different enemies. But anyway, suffice to say, we can move 2 targets close together, which is going to be important for how this group works. You need an open hand to grapple, and be aware that if you're holding your pike in your main hand and you try to use your bonus action unarmed strike for a grapple attempt, you actually can't do that. Okay? So let's go all the way back to the monk. You gain the following benefits only while you're unarmed or wielding only monk weapons. So as soon as we're holding the pike, it's not a monk weapon anymore. So if we want to do the bonus, we either have to have the pike put away. And if we do want to make that attack and use the pike, what we can do, we can make an attack with the pike. The rules say that you can put a weapon away as part of the attack action or draw it as part of the attack action. So on one turn, we attack with the pike and put it away, make our bonus attack. The next turn, we make our bonus attack first, because again, we got nothing in our hands, and then we draw the pike when we want to make our attack with the pike. So in this way, we can prove to the GM that anytime we want to be unarmed, we could be. It only matters for attacks of opportunities what's in your hands. So you'll be making unarmed strikes when your hands are emptied. So anyway, but it's possible to do this, but you would have to put the weapon away. Same thing with the dagger. You could attack with the dagger, use your nick attack within that attack action, put one of your daggers away, do the grapple attempt, and then on the next turn, you could try the grapple attempt first, draw a dagger, and then when you're making your attack with your first dagger, you're holding two light weapons, triggering the ability to use nick and make that second attack. So again, you could prove to your GM that this is possible to make two attacks with a dagger, still have a free hand, and then the next turn, you would still have a free hand and then be able to make two attacks. Anyway, it works going in and out of these weapons. You can't do crazy stuff with it, but it's fine. You'll be able to manage. And again, if we have a dagger in one hand and an empty hand, that's fine for using the extra attack because the dagger is a monk weapon. So we still qualify. Sometimes it's the right thing to do to stay out of range, in which case you use the pike to push things away as a method of disengaging, if you can do that. And then you can just walk away. At level 2, let's put all this stuff together. Let's take a combat round. And this, I will say, is probably the most challenging character to play out of this group. The other 3 characters are pretty straightforward. Tenamut's going to take a lot more decision-making in combat, which weapons we want to use, whether or not we want to grapple, whether we want to move enemies, all that stuff. At low levels, things die pretty quickly, so the amount of movement that we do is going to be less. But as we level up, those decisions are going to be more and more important. Level 2, out of combat. Tenamut can scout, right? We've got stealth, we've got perception, survival, animal handling. These are all good things to scout ahead. And especially if you're out in the woods, great. You can track, you can find things. You can move ahead together with Halleck if you're playing in this group of 4. We don't have expertise in perception or really high wisdom. We still have +2 in wisdom, though, and together with being proficient, gives us a +4, so we're not bad. Not bad at perception. If this character joins a group that already has more than one stealth character, I would definitely swap out stealth for athletics and let the 2 people who want to be stealthy go ahead. It's nice to have 2 in the group, but if there's already 2 in your group, definitely get that athletics. Level 2 in combat. We're going to rage on our first turn, move, and if we're not in range to make an attack, we can still throw daggers. We can also dash to get into range. So, important to use your bonus action to rage, get that established, get into combat. If you know combat is coming, with the way rage works now, you can continuously keep your rage up, but that would still mean you would probably have to be doing a rage on your first turn if you couldn't get into range to attack. Move, attack twice with your daggers, and a bonus action to attack. That's really what we want to be doing. Move into combat, attack. The nick attack for a dagger, of course, doesn't add your strength bonus to it, but still, it's good extra damage at this level. And again, you could get +1 weapons. So doing this with unarmed strikes, you would give up that extra dagger attack. You'd only get 1 unarmed strike and 1 extra one. And it's just better to use 2 weapons. Why not? And the rage bonus applies to the nick dagger, right? So we still get the rage, the +2 damage from rage. We can also use the pike if that makes sense to push, move, attack with the pike, just 1 attack. put the pike away so that we can use our bonus action to try to attack or grapple. We could also do a move, and then if we just wanted to do just a regular attack unarmed to try to grapple, and then if we're successful with the grapple, we could try the bonus action to make that target prone. So we could do that too. Tenamut can be pretty simple and straightforward to play, but you really have to pick the right mode. Damage mode, 2 daggers, 3 attacks per turn, rage, run in. Once we're up and running, you get a dagger for a d6 plus 5. It's a d6 plus 2 for the rage, plus 3 for your strength. I'm assuming at this point we don't have a magical weapon, so a d6 plus 5. The nick attack is a d6 plus 2, and then the bonus unarmed strike is a d6 plus 5. And that gives you an average of 16 damage turn. Once we take into account the hit rates, it'll take that, what is it, 17, 22.5 damage if everything hits, but 16 damage overall because we're going to miss quite a bit at this level. We can also use the pike to push and disengage if needed, or we could just go in. If it's a boss mob at level 2, you pretty much just want a dagger, dagger, punch. Dagger, dagger, kick. Dagger, dagger, dagger. Get them. Boss fight, multiple elites. If there's like a spellcaster in the back and a armored character up front, or like maybe it's a cleric and a fighter that you're fighting against, something like that, where they're kind of elite mobs for your level. Grab that caster, move them close together. If the combat's going to last, 3-4 rounds, something like that, get your targets close together for the rest of your group. At level 3, we're going to add another level of Barbarian. So we go Barbarian Monk, and then we're going to go back to Barbarian. Now, I thought for a long time about just going one level of Barbarian and then just beeline for 5th level Monk, extra attack, all the stuff that you want from Monk at level 5 and 6, and just getting that as soon as possible. But Danger Sense is going to give us advantage on dex saves, which is nice for all of our dexterity saves that we ever make. And Reckless Attack is just too good to pass up. It does give enemies advantage against us, but having advantage on all of our attacks, it means that our damage is going to land reliably. It means that our grapple attempts are going to at least hit reliably. Whether or not we succeed in the grapple is up to a saving throw, but we should routinely be able to engage with the grapple and at least give it a try. So I think taking this second level of Barbarian already here at level 3 is the right move. When to not Reckless Attack. People have asked me before, when should I Reckless Attack? And the answer is you should be Reckless Attacking. It's easier to say when not to Reckless Attack, right? If you have 2-3 enemies, who cares? Reckless Attack, deal the damage. If they get advantage on you, you'll get hit some. You're a Barbarian. You'll have resistance to that damage. It's fine. It's going to be fine. If you're surrounded by a bunch of enemies, or if there's a bunch of ranged attackers where we're likely to be the target, then we don't want to engage with the Reckless Attacks. And we may even want to do some crazy tactic like go prone. If you go prone, ranged attacks have disadvantage against you. If you use the dodge action, then everybody has disadvantage against you. So there's other tactics that we can use if there's a lot of enemies and we're likely to be the target. Otherwise, we're going to be Reckless Attacking. At level 4, we're going to take our second level of Monk. And this is kind of where it finally all has come together. So for the first few levels, we're just acting like a low-level Barbarian. We're just getting in there, smashing stuff, using our daggers, hitting for a lot of damage. At level 4, when we get our Monk features, now the character really, from here on out, we should really have the feeling for this character's personality. Your focus in martial training allows you to harness a well of extraordinary energy represented by focus points. You can spend these to fuel Monk features. Flurry of blows, patient defense, step of the wind. You expend focus points. It's unavailable until you finish a short or long rest. The fact that we get focus points back on a short rest now means for virtually every combat, we should just use all of our focus points. Just use them. If we get a short rest, we get them back. We'll also get a feature that lets us get them back for free once a day when we roll initiative, so there'll be plenty of focus points to go around. If something requires a saving throw, the DC is equal to 8 plus your wisdom modifier. So for us, that's a 2 right now, and probably for the rest of our career. Flurry of Blows, 1 focus point for 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action. Patient Defense, you can disengage as a bonus action. That just is something that you can do as a monk now, and it doesn't require use of a focus point. If you do use a focus point, you disengage and also dodge. So like I said before, if there's a lot of enemies and it's the right thing to do to dodge, instead of attacking with your bonus action, you can use Patient Defense, get the disengage and dodge effects for your character as a bonus action, and still have your attack action to do damage normally. Step of the Wind gives you the dash action for free, and if you spend a focus point, you get disengage and dash. I can see using Step of the Wind quite often on this character. Having dash as a bonus action is really good. That first round of combat, if you're not close to where you need to be, you probably still have to rage with your bonus action, but then in future turns, if you need to use that dash to get where you want to go, it's pretty good. Unarmored movement, we get an extra 10 feet of movement with this character. Fantastic. Uncanny Metabolism, this is what gives us that restore your expended focus points once a day when you roll initiative. Resets on a long rest. With Barbarian, if we can chain 2 combats together, the Cleric also has some spells that last 10 minutes. So with these abilities in the party, Armor of Agathis, if it's still up on your Warlock, if that's all ready to go after a combat's done, if you can go from one combat into the next within 10 minutes, you'll still have your Rage up. Cleric could potentially still have Spirit Guardians up. Armor of Agathis will still be running. So once per day, at least, if you can avoid this short rest, you'll still be able to get your focus points back for that combat. At level 4, where you're going to be using focus most is probably Flurry of Blows. When you really want to grapple something, use Flurry of Blows. It gives you 2 unarmed strikes, both of which can be grapple attempts. But remember, if you're making a grapple attempt here, they won't do damage. So activate Flurry of Blows, make a grapple attempt. If you're successful on your first attempt, you can still do an unarmed strike with the second to do damage. So our sequence: attack with 2 weapons in our hands to trigger Nick. Use the Nick dagger, put away 1 dagger, activate Flurry, attack, try a grapple. If the grapple hits, we use another attack, kick, whatever, for another unarmed strike. Or the second attack could be another grapple attempt. It just can't be damage. Remember that you can dash as a bonus action with a focus point. So it only takes... You can dash without a focus point. It only takes focus if you're dashing and also want to be able to disengage. Okay, level 5 monks. Level 3 monk, we're going to be able to deflect attacks now. That's another big upgrade for this character. And we're going to take Way of the Drunken Master subclass. I'm aware that this is a weak subclass, but I'm here for the 6th level feature and for the roleplay. Also gives us the performance skill, which I would use mostly for role-playing to put on a performance of Drunken Wonderment. Deflect attacks. When an attack roll hits you and its damage type is bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing, you can take a reaction to reduce the total damage against you. So these can be close combat attacks, they can be ranged attacks, anything that's bludgeoning, that has some component of bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing. Reduce the damage by D10 plus the dex mod and your monk level. So at level 3 monk plus 2 dex, that's a D10 plus 5. A lot of attacks at this level are in the range of 10 to 12 damage, so we could potentially reduce that by an average of 10.5. If the damage is reduced to 0, we could expend a focus point to redirect the attack's force. Choose a creature within 5 feet of us if it was a melee attack, or a creature within 60 feet that isn't behind total cover if it was a ranged attack, and that creature has to make a dex save, or you do 2 rolls of your martial arts die plus your dex mod, and the damage is the same type as dealt. So when I looked at this at first, I thought, okay, well, we'll have to pick and choose when we want to deflect attacks. But then I realized you can use this every single turn. It does take your reaction, so it'll take your reaction for the turn, but once per turn, you can reduce a hit. It only uses the focus point if you choose to redirect the damage. So even if you take it to 0, you don't have to spend the focus point. You can just reduce the damage to 0 and nothing. So this is going to be available forever. So we can dash without using a focus point now, which means we probably won't be using our focus points for that. We can deflect attacks without using a focus point, so we'll probably be doing that. And that frees up our focus points to be used with Flurry of Blows, or if we really need to do Step of the Wind to get that dodge action. Drunken technique. We learned this at level 3, right? We can learn how to twist and turn as part of our Flurry of Blows. Whenever we do Flurry of Blows, we gain the benefit of disengage. And your walking speed increases by 10 feet. For a lot of monks, this is just really a lame ability, but we're a skirmisher. It's going to give us extra movement speed, which we want. It's going to let us disengage, which we could potentially want. So if we do a Flurry of Blows, we do a couple hits, we get somebody grappled, we drag them over where we want, we drop them off by Archon, who's the tank for our group. And then, since we have disengage and 10 extra feet of movement, it's possible that we could drag that character a short distance and walk away and disengage if we wanted to and go somewhere else. So it gives a lot of flexibility. We've got 40 base feet of movement. If we've been able to get Long Strider cast on us, we've got 2 other characters in the group that can use Long Strider. So that would take us to 50 feet. And we would have 60 feet of movement if we did Flurry of Blows. So if you're thinking, well, grappling a target, you won't have enough movement to drag and then get out, you could drag that character 20 feet and only burn up 40 feet of your movement and still have 20 feet to reposition yourself somewhere else, and you will have disengaged as part of Flurry of Blows. So Drunken technique is actually nice on this character, better than on most monks. At level 6, we're going to be Monk 4. That's a feat level. We're also going to get Slow Fall, reduce damage from falling by 5 times our Monk level. It's nice when it triggers. It can give fun little game moments, right, where you fall and don't take much damage. Here we're going to take the Grappler feat. There's a lot of things that compete as really good feats, but Grappler feat is best for group synergy. Mage Slayer could be really good here. Crusher, I think, could potentially be the best feat. Charger, this character is often going to be moving and will be able to trigger Charger whenever they want. But I think overall the best feat for the group is Grappler. That's going to give us more chances to grapple and move enemies where we want for the team. At level 7 will be Monk 5. That gets Stunning Strike. Unlike most monks, Tenamut kind of doesn't care about Stunning Strike. It's 1 focus to attempt a stun once per turn. Enemy gets con save. Everybody knows that enemy con saves are usually the best saves they have, and our DC is already pretty low. It's DC 13 based on our wisdom. So the amount of times that we're going to be using Stunning Strike is limited. It may be something, if you've got free focus points and it makes sense to try to use it, sure, if we get it, great. Otherwise, we'll often be using this for Flurry of Blows to get lots of grapple attempts or extra damage. We get extra attack at level 5. Enough said. When you attack, you get another attack. That's going to be really good for us. Martial Arts die, 1d8, and Spike Growth is going to let us grapple. We have 2 allies that can use Spike Growth, so there's a tactic that people use where they grapple an enemy and they drag it all around the outside of the Spike Growth and deal insane amounts of damage. If that's allowed at your table, we've got 120 movement, and we could even potentially do 3 moves. If you've already got them grappled from a prior turn, you could move with your movement. You could move with a dash action as your action for the turn, and then you could do Step of the Wind, or Yeah, Step of the Wind is what gives you the dash as a bonus action. So then you can go like 180 feet. It's really a lot of movement. That's not allowed at the table where I play. That's considered sort of cheesing the rules. But even so, if spike growth is the right tactic, you could use your pike. You have 2 attacks, right? We could attack an extra attack and push one thing really far back into the spike growth if we wanted to, or 2 different enemies 10 feet into the spike growth. And then we get our damage from the attacks as well as the damage from spike growth. And they have to walk out of the spike growth on their own turn, which does more damage. And that's pretty good. All right, so let's look at the grappler feat here. I wanted to talk about extra attack before we went into detail, but now I think it's a good time to bring these 2 things together. The grappler feat's going to increase our strength by 1, going to put us at 18 strength. Punch and grab. When you hit a creature with an unarmed strike as part of the attack action on your turn, you can use both the damage and grapple option once per turn. So before, when we only had 1 attack per turn, we would do a dagger, triggering the 2-weapon fighting with Nick, and we could use another dagger. So both of our attack actions were taken up, and we couldn't really have a free hand if we wanted to use that. Now with extra attack, we can do 1 dagger, trigger the Nick, do the Nick attack, put a dagger away as part of that attack action. We still have the extra attack from our extra attack feature, and that we can do an unarmed strike and trigger grappler, do damage with the unarmed strike, and then check and see if we get the grapple. So this is very nice. Dagger, put it away, second dagger, grapple attempt, you get damage with that strike, and if you grapple the enemy, good. You can do flurry of blows if you want, you can drag them, you can just do your bonus action with a single attack for damage, however you want to play that out. But grappler doesn't work as part of flurry of blows because it says as part of the attack action on your turn. So what you can't do is you can't make 3 attacks with your daggers and then do your flurry of blows and expect one of your flurry of blows to both grapple and damage. So we kind of had to have the extra attack before grappler really works. So when you get that feat at level 6, it won't really be fully effective. When you get it at extra attack at level 7, you can weave it into your attack sequence. All right, so now we'll check in at level 7 on how this character plays. Tenamut should be hilarious. Out of combat, Way of the Drunken Master doesn't require being drunk, but Tenamut for me is always tipsy. He's acting a lot more drunk than he really is. He's weaving around. If you need some inspiration, think of Captain Jack Sparrow maybe, or Way of the Drunken Master is a movie. You can kind of watch the movie and see how he acts. And that is it's so well done. Like the blocks and kicks and strikes that he's doing all look like they're part of just bobbing and weaving around like he's totally drunk. So look for some inspiration if you want to see how to roleplay this character. I think there's so much fun stuff you can do with that. I think Tenamut, he's not an old man, but I think he loves telling stories, right? People drink a little bit and they love telling stories. I think Tenamut's always willing to tell stories about the farm and how great swampweed tastes and how adventuring food can never compare to the taste of that, swampweed that we pulled out of that lake. We got the performance skill, so use it to entertain the group, either by telling stories, doing stunts, falling down, standing back up. When you're tracking, maybe you roll forward on your shell. All kinds of stuff you can do if you're a crazy half-drunk turtle. Level 7 in combat. We really need that Long Strider by now. We've got 2 characters that can cast it. Somebody should be putting Long Strider on Tenamut. We're still going to use the tactic where we're going to drop initiative to go after the main adversary. The reason why we want to use this tactic in combat, if the fight starts and we're able to grapple the main character, drag him over, put him in combat where there's 2 enemies close together, and now our team's going to start cashing in on Spirit Guardian damage against 2 targets. The Ranger's going to do better damage against 2 targets. The Archon the tank can do cleave damage against 2 targets. So this is all going to go well. And then the main character takes their turn next. they break the grapple, and they leave. And then our whole turn was for nothing, right? Or maybe they have a teleport ability, they misty step away, and now the characters are no longer together, and they're not grappled, and it just all is garbage, right? So this should be something that is allowed. It's a little bit above the table, but basically if one of the main monsters is going to go, or any monster that you choose to grapple, and they have initiative 11, you just set your initiative to 10. Now, it's not a readied action. You're not going to move and ready an action for initiative 10. You're going to completely change your initiative until you're going right after a monster. Now, let's say the monster goes and you would be next, but a couple of your allies are in between, then those allies should let you go right after the monster. So monster goes, they drop their initiative, you go, grapple, move two things together, then your allies go and do their 2 target attacks. So in this way, we don't care what our initiative is on this character, and if we roll really good initiative, we're going to want to trade that over with Halleck with her alertness feat and give her the big initiative, because we're probably going to need to drop anyway. But in that way, if you wait until after the monster goes, then you grapple them, you move them, they have to wait. Everybody gets to go before they can break that grapple or teleport away or whatever. All right, so your first turn is still going to be rage, move, and if it makes sense to grapple, you could rage, do a little bit of movement, do 2 grapple attempts with unarmed strikes with your attack actions, or 2 daggers and an unarmed strike for grapple, then finish your movement, however, if everybody's close. The ideal attack turn at this level is to attack with a dagger, do the nick attack, do the 3rd attack with your extra attack, do a flurry, and it's either a grapple or an attack for 2 more flurries. So that's 5 total strikes against a target. You can also do a pike to push an enemy, and you could push 2 enemies within 5 feet of each other this way, if it makes more sense to do it that way. Just remember, hit with the pike and push, hit with the pike and push, put the pike away, so that you can close the distance and use your flurry of blows for additional attacks. You can also do something like grapple, attack, then move, and then you could use step of the wind to dash and disengage, or flurry of blows to use the disengage part of that. Remember, we can flurry of blows and disengage. So we can use dash with a focus point or flurry of blows with a focus point, disengage, and then walk away. And that might be the case if you want to just move something up, put it in combat with Archon, and walk away. So there's a lot of different things you can do to control your position and the enemy's position. And if you do have something grappled, I've seen it ruled where grappling does allow you to control the enemy's movement, so therefore also allows you to control the enemy's facing. So if you grapple a beholder, for example, according to the rules, you could point that main eye for the beholder that has an anti-magic field. You could point that at yourself. Pointing at yourself means that the beholder won't be able to use any of their eye rays on you, because the anti-magic field does prevent the eye rays. So what's great with this build, you can go behind a beholder, grapple it, flip it around so that the main eye is looking at you. Now the rest of the eyes can still target the rest of your group, but the anti-magic is going to be focused on you. If there's a time when you specifically don't want anyone in the party to be exposed to the eye rays, then you can stay in front of the beholder, point the eye toward the entire party. So facing can sometimes be like super powerful. Your GM might just say, look, that's not realistic. You can't point the beholder. And then, it's over if the GM says it's over. But I believe, and I've seen it where it's ruled that that's okay to do. Level 7 in action, Clea is the cleric for the group that I presented with Spirit Guardians. Archon can deal a bunch of damage with cleave attacks. Halleck thrives with 2 or more targets. This party's meant to have 2 targets put together for synergy. So do that. You will get more damage out of the group by putting 2 targets together than Tenamut would get by just doing a little bit more damage to a single target. So when it makes sense, your job is really to put those 2 targets together for group strategy. And whether it's the group that I've pre-built here, the Aziran's Aspirants, or just another group that has good area of effect abilities, putting targets together might be a good thing. Combat positioning. You're often going to want a position like this in combat where you bring two enemies together and then stay within melee range. In the left picture, Tenamut is the black square behind, locking these two characters where they are. Archon is a tank. She's the purple square in front. If either one of these enemies want to get to the cleric is the blue square. If the orange or brown want to move, they're going to trigger an attack of opportunity from one of these characters or the other. You can do a grapple attempt as an attack of opportunity, but remember from the grappler feat, it has to be on your turn to both do damage and also do a grapple attempt. But you could do a no damage grapple attempt. Something tries to move out, triggers an attack of opportunity. You grapple it, its movement goes to 0. It can't move anyway. You have to have a free hand to do it. If you're already grappling one target and the other one moves and you don't have a free hand, then obviously you can't do that. But these kinds of tactics can really lock two enemies in place. Against large enemies, Tenamut's going to want to be really, within 5 feet of them. And Archon has a reach weapon. She can then back off and be within 10 feet. These large enemies can still reach her for attacks, which is fine. But again, they can't move around. And the cleric is behind here and exposing these targets to spirit guardians. So in this way, we put two targets together. Our whole team is doing a bunch of damage. The cleric can move back, move forward, expose them, do damage on their turn, and then the monsters end their round in the aura and take another round of damage. And that's kind of what we want to do with our combat positioning. So for damage, the daggers are now a D8, right? We've graduated on our martial arts die to a D8. So we dagger, nick dagger, and flurry for 2 more hits. That's 5 total strikes. A D8 plus 2 rage bonus, plus 4 strength, plus 1 for the weapon, for 4 of the attacks, and then 7.5 for the nick offhand attack because it doesn't get the strength bonus to it. But that's a total of 53.5 damage overall. And with reckless attack and bless running, we have a 97% chance to hit. With average AC, that's 51 damage per round reliably. It's 40 with just bonus attack, not using any focus for the, we drop 11 damage if we didn't do flurry of blows and we just did a single attack. It's very sustainable and we still get a free grapple every round if we want it. It's pretty good. If Halleck or Clea use spike growth, don't run behind the spike growth with Tenamut. Tenamut has a lot of movement and a lot of durability, but if you put a spike growth in the middle of the battlefield, you want to control the enemies, you want to make them move through it. It's really a bad idea to then take your monk character, jump over the spike growth, and start dealing with the characters in the back. Even if there's a threatening caster or archer or something back there, you got to stay on the front side of the spike growth until the team is ready to drop the spike growth and deal with the monsters on the other side. I've seen this at tables before where one of the casters puts up a fog cloud or a darkness to divide the battlefield, and then somebody just runs out the other side of the darkness, and then it doesn't divide the battlefield. It just gives all of the enemies a clear target on the other side of the battlefield where the cleric and spellcasters can't get to or see to help. So don't outrun your party. That's foolish. Taking hits with damage mitigation every round. We've got that deflection that we can use every single round. We've got rage that gives us resistance against damage. We can soak a lot. If we do think that we're in a situation where we're going to take too much damage, patient defense, stop using reckless attack, and ride it out till we get it under control. The item for this character, absolute best, unequivocally best thing that we could possibly do for this character is Belt of Giant Strength. In fact, we're going to rely on getting one. And if the group had a pile of money and they said, what should we spend this pile of money on? The answer should always be a Belt of Giant Strength for Tenamut. It's going to do so much for the group by increasing the DCs on the grapple checks, more reliably put two characters together. It's going to increase Tenamut's damage with every one of those tons of attacks that they're able to put out. So the whole group benefits from this in a very meaningful way. So this should be the biggest item for the group. And if you get a low-level belt and then upgrade later, Archon could really take advantage of the belt that you're giving up. So even if you have to have like a 23 strength one at first and then upgrade to a 27 strength one later, whatever, it's fine. There's going to be plenty of people in the group that could take advantage of it. Now, if you built a normal dexterity-based monk, you could still do this same thing, right? You could have an 8 strength for your ability score and put on a belt of giant strength for 21 strength and just go to 21. I don't like that. I don't think it's a very fair way to build a character, to say I'm going to rely on an item to change the way I play my character. And if you didn't get that item, your barbarian abilities, you wouldn't be able to use strength. So I don't like that. I think you actually have to build your character as a strength-based character to be fair. And then if you asked for something to improve your strength, the GM shouldn't be too angry about that and should allow it. But if your GM doesn't allow it, or if the new 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide doesn't have this as an item, then you still can succeed with the build as it's listed. Goggles of Night, if you can get them, you want to solve that dark vision problem. It does help. Goggles of Night doesn't take an attunement slot, so it's a pretty good way to solve dark vision. You want to get magical daggers when you can. Bracers of Defense give 2 armor. The criteria says you can't be wearing an armor or shield. We're not wearing armor, and we don't plan to ever use a shield, so 2 AC is nice. We'll take it. Cloak or Ring of Protection, the way that I've seen it played before, a Cloak of Protection and Ring of Protection, each one gives +1 to armor class and +1 to saves, but I've seen it ruled where that's the same effect. So you can't have both items and take advantage of both items. If you had both items, you would just get 1 effect, 1 AC and 1 save. If your GM allows you to have 2 items, and stacking these 2 would give you 2 armor class and +2 to all your saves, then that would be, I think, pretty broken. But yeah, it's really good for this character. I would spend my efforts getting more defensive items rather than trying to increase my offense. We're going to be able to do plenty of damage just with normal magical weapons and all the abilities we get. So focus on defensive stuff for magical items. Potions of Growth are good. Remember, we can only grapple things one size larger than us, and we can drag things with grapple of equal size or smaller without using up our movement due to that grappler feat. So if we want to move a large enemy and we can drink a Potion of Growth, we can be large and drag them at full speed. That's pretty fantastic. Hill Giant Strength gives us 21 strength. We'll already have 18, but it is another +1 on hit and damage and saving DCs. So it may be something we'll want to use. If I could have anything for a character at these mid-tier levels, I would say those Bracers of Defense, a Ring of Protection, Belt of Hill Giant Strength, Goggles of Night, and magical weapons. That's 3 attunement slots, and I don't think it's too greedy. But yeah, obviously, work toward that by level 10. Belt of Giant Strength takes damage per round from 51 to 56. Just take a look at this. The grapple DC would be 15 normally at this level, but if we got that belt, it would go to 16 with 56 average damage per round. Stone Giant Belt would take us to DC 17 with 61 damage. Fire Giant would be 18 with 65 damage. Cloud Giant is 19 with 70 damage. And Storm Giant would be 20, grapple DC of 20. So getting that grapple DC to increase is really a big deal. And getting the extra damage is really a big deal. So this weapon, this item just escalates your damage in a way that's really incredible. So roleplay at level 7. Tenamut stumbles forward in a run, appears to trip and roll on a shell, pops up, continues to stagger forward. An enemy fighter lashes out to stab Tenamut, but he sways and easily avoids the clumsy tactic. Tenamut walks right up to him and says, sure. He reaches out like he's maybe going to give him a pat, but instead grabs the guard by the back of his armor, swings him around, smacks him into another guard, somehow kicks him in the shins on the way by, and then he's just like windmilling forward again and ends up standing next to the enemy healer. He lets out a gigantic turtle belch and takes another big drink from his flask and just shrugs at the cleric, daring him to do anything. So this would be a turn where we've use the move action and step of the wind action to dash and disengage. So we go forward, we grab a guard, we grapple it, we move it, we do some extra damage with our extra attack on the way by, and continue to move. We have disengaged so they can't take attacks of opportunity at us, and we end up way in the back, standing next to the enemy spellcaster. And then if he tries to move away, we've got attacks of opportunity to try to grab him, stop him, or we're right on top of him for whatever happens next. So it's kind of fun for role-playing, I would think. Level 8, we get Monk 6, we get Empowered Strikes. That lets us use force damage. I don't think we're going to want to do that unless there's resistances and force is necessary. Eventually we're going to get Crusher. It's going to allow us some stuff if we use bludgeoning damage. I don't really see the need to use force damage. And again, we're going to be using daggers, and we're kind of stuck on the dagger damage that way. But if you want to use Empowered Strikes, you can. It gives another 5 feet of movement here. That's really good. Tipsy Sway. This is a reason we took this subclass. It's one of the big payouts. Leap to the feet. When we're prone, we can stand up, spending 5 feet of movement. This character shouldn't be prone very much, but if we get knocked over, standing up for 5 feet keeps our mobility, so it's a nice little trinket effect. Redirect attack. When a creature misses you with a melee attack roll, you can spend a key point, a focus point, as a reaction to cause that attack to hit another creature of our choice other than the attacker within 5 feet. This is another one of those things with a whole bunch of micro requirements, right? Something has to swing at us and miss. We have to have a focus point to spend. It's going to burn our reaction, and then we can make that attack target another creature, but it has to be within 5 feet. Oh boy, that's a lot of requirements. In a normal group, in a normal setting, we're not going to be getting this off very often, but this group, this character, the whole idea of this group is to put two things close together and use a bunch of cleave damage to take them down really quickly. So we are going to be intentionally setting this up where one creature is going to be beside another creature. Whatever we have grappling, whatever we grapple, has disadvantage against anybody but us, so most likely they're going to be attacking us. If they miss, we can redirect their attack into the other monster. Now, it doesn't say they roll to attack the other monster. It simply says if they miss us, they hit the other creature. That attack is a hit. Read it. It says, as a reaction, you cause that attack to hit one creature of your choice. Now, the way I read that, it doesn't say the creature's making an attack roll against that second target. They already made an attack roll against you that missed, so the attack hits, they just roll damage. If you put one fire giant next to another fire giant and they miss you, it's going to be a lot of damage. They have multiple attacks per turn, so once you burn your reaction, you're subject to the next attack. But like I said, this is the kind of ability that can give you just these fun character moments that you can tell stories about. If dash isn't needed, you can start with Flurry of Blows and non-reckless. You got 2 chances to secure grapple. You'll be able to grapple an enemy and use your movement for the turn to move them next to somebody else, and you can use your normal action to just dodge. Or you can hit twice with advantage from Grappler. You have advantage on hitting the targets that you've got grappled, so you won't need to use Reckless Attack. So you could dodge, you could use your actions to grapple, and then use Step of the Wind to get dodge. There's a bunch of different ways that you could be hard to hit. And then try to get Tipsy Sway to go off. The skill is pretty useless against solo boss mobs. If you fight a dragon, you're not going to Tipsy Sway it into anything, so it's just a blank feature. It's once every 10, 15 rounds, this will go off in a way where you can make it work. So it's not very often, but imagine when you do get like one giant to attack another, or like, let's say there's a dragon knight riding a dragon, and you end up on the dragon's back fighting the dragon knight, and you make the dragon knight miss and hit his own mount, or the dragon attacks you and you make it knock the rider off. There could just be so many fun things that Tipsy Sway could do. Again, it's more about storytelling moments than it is about overpowered or broken mechanics, but man, it just seems like so much fun to me. And there's not many ways to make a Drunken Master work, so we're having fun with them. Barbarian level 3, we could pick up Intimidation here. We could also pick up Athletics, finally, if we wanted to. Primal Knowledge adds strength to checks while raging. Things like Acrobatics, Intimidation, Stealth, Perception, and Survival. We have Stealth, Perception, and Survival, so we're going to be able to add our strength to those checks while we're raging. And if we really need high checks, we could just rage out of combat. Or most often what happens is we complete a combat and we just continue to maintain rage afterwards. So we'll do that thing where we try to go from one combat to the next. We'll go finish that combat. We'll maintain our rage, stealth, scout, perception, survival, get to the next combat before rage runs out. For subclass, we're going to take Path of the Wild Heart, and bear form comes to mind. It's less good than it used to be. There's more types of damage that hit through bear, but like if there's a lot of elemental spellcasters or fire damage or something like that, bear could still be a really good choice. Eagle can be interesting. It's basically a step of the wind, but we don't have to use a focus point to do it. It could be okay, but since we do have step of the wind, I don't think we'll use eagle. Wolf is what we're here for. Wolf is so good. When you need advantage, especially like in those boss fights, trying to get advantage against certain monsters can be really hard. But this just says, you walk up into combat, the rest of your group has advantage. Tenamut has reckless attacks. He has advantage on all of his hits. So all he has to do is walk up to something. He has advantage on all of his hit rolls. The rest of the group has advantage on all their hit rolls. Profit. Move 2 or 3 targets together. Stand next to them. Everybody has advantage on everything. They can use skills and abilities that would normally be used trying to get advantage to just simply do more damage. It's really good, and we plan to be next to things all the time anyway, right? We're putting them next to each other, tanking them, trying to get a tipsy sway. Level 10 will be Monk 7. We get Evasion, so now when we make a dex save, there's no damage at all. We have that danger sense from Barbarian, so now we got some really great synergy. We have advantage on our dex saving throws, and if we save, we take no damage from those effects. Nice. Monk 8 is another feat level. If you have Belt of Giant Strength here, I would really love to take Speedy, get an extra 10 feet of movement, ignore difficult terrain when we dash. We dash a lot on this character, and that'll allow us to get our Dexterity to 16 as well. That's another +1 to all of our deflection rolls, all of that kind of stuff, +1 to skills that use Dexterity. So rounding up to 16 finally would be really nice. If you don't have a belt, I would take the Crusher feat here for more pushes. Monk 9, acrobatic movement. We can walk on walls and water. It's okay. There's situations where that will be very fun to do. You can't stop your movement on water. You have to walk across the water and end on solid ground, but we'll have like 70 feet of movement by this time, and if we dash, we'll have 140, so we can walk across a lot of water. At level 13, we're Monk 10, we get Flurry of Blows, Patient Defense, and Step of the Wind upgraded. Flurry now does 3 hits instead of 2. Patient Defense gives us temporary hit points, equal to 2 rolls of the martial arts die. And Step of the Wind, we can choose a willing creature and taxi that with us when we move. If we use Step of the Wind, we're getting disengage ourselves and dash. The other creature is going to not provoke attack opportunity, so we can literally go anywhere we want on the battlefield with no attacks of opportunity. Crazy strong. This is not a free grapple. It has to be a willing creature, but we'll talk about that more here in a second. And then self-restoration through sheer force of will. We can end one of the conditions on ourselves. Back here when we had Monk 8 and we got a feat, I didn't mention Mage Slayer. That could be a really good feat, but at this level, we're going to be able to end Charm, Frightened, or Poisoned, and that's often what we would be wanting to use the Mage Slayer save for. So I think it's a bit redundant. I would take Crusher there, and I would wait for this ability to kick in at 13. But we can end Charm, Frightened, or Poisoned. If you're charmed, you still spend your turn being charmed, and then it ends at the end. So it's not perfect, but it's still good. You don't have to eat or drink. It doesn't give you levels of exhaustion. So Step of the Wind. What? We get another 5 movement speed at Monk 10 also, right? But this Step of the Wind now, let's take a look at this. We have 30 foot of base movement and plus 20 from Monk, plus 10 from Speedy, we took that feat, and plus 10 from having Long Strider. If we use Step of the Wind next to a target, we could potentially move 140 feet without any attacks of opportunity. If there was a reason to, we could go another 70 feet with our action and go 210 feet. I imagine 140 is enough. What could we get up to? Spirit Guardians. The cleric puts up Spirit Guardians. When that aura enters an enemy's space for the first time on a turn, they take damage. So Aklea, the cleric, fires up Spirit Guardians, moves around, damages all the enemies. Tenamut waits until after Aklea's done, goes over to them, activates Step of the Wind, drags them around the battlefield, exposes everything to Spirit Guardians. It's a new turn, so they take damage from all that again. If there's 3 or more targets, we're going to taxi and take Aklea all over. We can drop Aklea off wherever they want to be dropped off, and we still have our action to do dagger, nick dagger, extra attack, unarmed strike, grapple, if we want to. Shenanigans. At level 14, Monk 11, Drunkard's Luck. Starting at 11th level, you get a lucky bounce at the right moment. When you make an ability check or an attack roll or a saving throw where you have disadvantage, you can burn 2 focus points to cancel disadvantage. It doesn't give you advantage, it just cancels the disadvantage. Well, I can think of one circumstance where this will be a very good feature, and that is if it gets rewritten in a future book. Right now, it's trash. I suppose if you were making a life or death save and you somehow had disadvantage on that save, it would be worth 2 focus points to cancel that. But overall, I don't see much use for it. Our martial arts die also goes to a D10 here, so that's really good. At level 14, let's do a combat check-in and out of combat. Tenamut should really be the quintessential drunken monk by now, right? Out of combat, jester-style comic relief, help the party, scout, survival, stealth, perception, all those things are still good. Keep rage going as long as possible, and we can boost those things even further with our strength modifier. If we've got a belt of giant strength, can you imagine having a +7 on your perception check and then adding another 8 for your strength for a +15? It's better than having expertise in the skill. So your stealth and perception could be insane. Combat prep. Let's get Long Strider. There are circumstances where Warding Bond could help, but just remember, resistance doesn't stack. Warding Bond gives resistance. Barbarian Rage has resistance. So only if there's like Tenamut's going to be going into a pit of fire or swimming in lava or something like that. But then, even then, you could just do your Bear Rage and be immune to that damage type, or have resistance to fire damage as well. So I don't know. There may be a circumstance where it makes sense, but usually not. And then every combat round is just going to be some combination of moving, activating one of your monk abilities, either for free or with a focus point, making 2 dagger attacks and an unarmed strike, or 3 dagger attacks, unarmed attacks to grapple, using massive bonus actions, Step of the Wind, Flurry, Grapple, carrying allies with you with Step of the Wind. This is going to be the highest single target damage dealer in the group, more or less. The other characters are able to do more damage on multiple targets, but Tenamut can do a lot to one target. So you got to be flexible. In a single boss fight like a dragon, Tenamut's just going to be up close, personal, probably tanking the hits and just going crazy with as much damage as they can. Damage in combat at this level. We got a dagger. We got 2 1d10 +2 +8 for, I'm assuming by now, we got a Cloud Giant belt. So we'll just take a look at what that does for our damage. D10 +2 for rage, +8 for the belt, and +2 weapons by this point. 17.5 per hit. Nearly 100% chance to hit with belt and bless. That puts us at 97 damage for the round. Remember, one of those attacks we can't add our strength bonus to because it's an extra 2-weapon attack, and we never took 2-weapon fighting or something to give us damage with that. So 97 damage is still pretty good. And you still have your reaction to deal more damage or mitigate damage or tipsy sway. If there's 3 or more targets, using a bonus action to Step of the Wind and move a Clea all around the battlefield, they're going to be doing an average of 20.5 per target with an upcasted Spirit Guardians at this level. You also get to reposition characters however you want. I think it's really powerful. I think I'd be using a lot of my focus points for moving other characters around with me. If the party needs to use spike growth, drag an enemy in, push, hit with the pike, you still got a pike. Pike won't come out very often these days, but if it does, you can use it. You can also use unarmed strikes with the crusher feat and occasionally punch things for movement. Belt of Giant Strength for items is still the primary ask. Blood Fury Tattoo, I love this tattoo. I think if you think about what it can do for a character like this, Tenamut could be way down on life and then just start using these Blood Fury Tattoo procs, 4d6 extra damage, and you heal for half of the damage you do. You could trigger that up to 6 times in a round for burst damage. It would take you from 105 to 189 at this level. Almost 200 damage. I still think defensive items are better, but that could be fun because it does give you more damage and also healing. Let's hope they come out with some cool magical unarmed strike weapons where you could just put them on and get a +1 to hit and damage like you can with a normal weapon, but it's considered an unarmed strike. +1 flaming gauntlets or something. Roleplay at level 14, Tenamut's going to wait. Silent, focused, strong. He's ready, but he waits. Remember, he's waiting for when the monster moves. And then a Clea is going to come toward him. And then he sees the enemy go that he wants to wait. And then now, gives a signal. A Clea grabs a rope that's tied across the back of his shell. And Tenamut just blazes across the battlefield, scarring all the enemies with the aura. Staggers around, spins in a dizzying display of speed, power, putting in some attacks along the way, grabbing a character that he wants to drag, dragging it for full movement for free because he's got the grappler feat if it's his size or smaller. So now he's got somebody on his back, he's dragging along a grapple target, puts 2 things together, drops a Clea off where they want, and goes around, maybe, grabbed onto an archer, throws him on the ground, and gives him a stomp. Remember, if we do, we got a sequence of 3 attacks with our turn. So we could do attack for a grapple, attack for shove prone, and then another attack for damage. So he's running across the battlefield, grabbing people, throwing them down. And then he's just standing over this guy, and somebody shoots an arrow at him, and he's drinking from his flask, and he just kind of flips the flask and knocks the arrow into the target, the guy at his feet, with his deflect. Fun stuff. Level 15, you'd be Monk 12. There's a lot of feats that seem good, but they're kind of redundant. If we do have that Belt of Giant Strength, we don't need to max out our strength. So we could take other things. Mage Slayer, we've already got the ability to end stuff. It's a bit redundant, but it's still good. Having like 1 legendary resistance is still really good because then you don't have to spend that turn charmed. You just avoid it altogether. I think Sentinel might be the best. We've already got a bunch of reactions, and Sentinel is another reaction, but it's kind of the trifecta now, right? If something attacks us and hits, we can deflect. If something attacks us and misses, we can potentially tipsy sway. If something attacks somebody else instead of us, we can use Sentinel to punish them. So maybe it's good. I would have to actually play this character at high level to figure out if that's as good as it seems on paper, but I like it. 16 through 20, we would take Monk up, get Deflect Energy at level 13, then now we can deflect energy types, not just bludgeoning, slashing, piercing damage. Level 17 gives Discipline Survivor proficiency in all saves and another 5 feet to movement speed. Proficiency in all saves is really, really good. Level 18 is Perfect Focus, more ways to restore focus. Level 19, we get Monk 16. Because we're level 19, we would qualify for an Epic Boon feat. I would take dexterity here, continue to work on my dexterity, and go to 18. I love the boon of true sight. Just being able to see everything as it truly is at high levels is pretty important. And then level 20, we could take Barbarian 4 and get another epic boon, because that's a feat level for Barbarians. And I would say we've got all the saves covered. If we took the epic boon of energy resistance, I think that could be interesting, and take psychic and necrotic damage, and now your bear form is really only susceptible to force and radiant. Anyway, I think it would be cool. You could also take one of the durability feats, or the one that makes you, if you die, you heal. There's fortitude, and I can't remember the name of the other one, but when you get to 0 hit points, you heal for half your hit points. You could do either one of those as well for an epic boon. Pick your favorite. So at level 20, we're a Barbarian 4, Monk 16. We got tons of control. We're tanking, grappling, moving energies to get enemies together. Our Wolf Rage is providing advantage for all of our team against all the enemies that we're close to. We've got spike growth synergy. We can push things around. We got a feature called Uber of the Wind. I called it Uber of the Wind because it's really the ultimate taxi service. Grab an ally, cart them all around the battlefield. Deflect attacks, deflect elements, Tipsy Sway, Sentinel if we took that feat. It's got to be fun to be playing this Tipsy Tortle. Damage is basically the same at level 20 as it is at 14. We've just added survivability, durability, utility, saves, all that stuff. More hit points. That's going to wrap it up for Tenamut Stagger Shell. If you like this, please hit that like button on the way out if you didn't hit it on the way in. Subscribe to the channel to see more of this stuff in the future. And of course, leave me any comments you have. If you like the build, if you saw something that could have been done differently or better, or if I misunderstood any of the rules, leave me that feedback. Hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. I am part of a group that plays live on Monday nights, 7 o'clock p.m. Central Time in the U.S. The Mythlanders, look it up, DM Feanor on Twitch, and you can also find the videos for prior sessions on YouTube. The links are in the description down below. You can click on those and come check us out. I would love to see you over there. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you in the next one.